Hello and welcome to another week of Devlog number 13. So on Monday, I spent a little time on the weekend researching different design patterns in order to solve some of my dependency issues. So like my player and the enemy, they were kind of in order to implement functionality, the quick and easy method is just to pop in references to the inspector and read off the data. The only problem with that is that if something changes with the other, you break the other. So they're tightly coupled, and that's not a good design pattern. You don't want to have that going on, and especially when you have a lot of stuff going on in your scene and everything's hooked together. You don't want to have that kind of thing. It's kind of like the old days where they had wires going everywhere across the street instead of burying the wires underground. You want to have a clean, separated design. It's just part of good engineering practice. So, I was researching on the weekend, like how do I clean up these dependencies, implement a system to one of the systems. I don't think they have an out of the box thing in Unity, but they have something in Vector where you can actually send global messages, and that's kind of an important thing where you don't want to communicate directly with another object. You kind of want to send out a global message to say, hey, I died, or somebody sends a message and then another game object like an enemy somewhere is actually subscribed as a listener, says, oh, the player died. Well, I want to execute some functionality. So they're not directly connected. It's more like a radio broadcast, and you're tuned into a specific channel. So I was watching videos on how to actually implement that, and I figured out how to do simple scripts to implement these channels, like one to send, one to receive, so that certain events can happen and you don't have to communicate directly with the other game object. Also, in my research, I found out there's a concept of shared data between objects. So instead of so you can actually share data with a scriptable object without having to actually go to the player and get that data information from them directly. You can just tap into the underlying data object as a asset. So that further enables me to decouple any sort of one game object for another. So I spent time implementing that system. It was a bit tricky, but now I have a good event kind of channel system to use, a good process in case I want to do that in the future. And also, I was working with my Odin validator to kind of run in this scene and kind of say, okay, are there any other open dependencies, and kind of testing out each game object individually, like my player and the enemy, to make sure that if I just pop them into the scene, they run. The scene runs, the app runs without crashing because there's a missing dependency. So I cleaned all that up. There's no more tightly. It all works as usual, and it's just a better design going forward. That's how you want to do it. So those tools are in place. And I also put in some things to make sure if there is an in-scene reference dependency, I can actually set a required tag in the inspector so my validator can catch it if So if I do in the future put something in the scene that's something's missing, I'll get a little Odin validator. This will turn up red and be like, hey, you're actually missing something. You gotta fix this, and it'll tell me exactly where it is. I don't have to go looking in the code and be like, oh, it's just missing that, Instead of spending 10 minutes for each one trying to figure out what's broken, I can just see directly, like, oh, I gotta do this, and leave notes for myself, like, okay, if you want this functionality, you have to put in this reference. It needs this reference to operate correctly. Things like that, just to make my life easier. So Another thing, in my research, I found a way to make the Odin Inspector tags work within the Invector system. Previously, I couldn't do things like this. I couldn't implement a lot of the great features within the system. It would the Invector system would block that out. But there was a post on Invector that says, "Oh, you want to use Odin within our system? Okay, just change this around, do that, and now I can use." Now I can customize the Invector editor inspectors with Odin components now, which is great. So got all that done, clean everything up, and by the end of the day on Monday, I was ready to start working on. I'll start working on player features, specifically the Epic of player cover features. I have a whole list of things surrounding features, or just around cover, that I wanted to start working on. First of which was the issue on tall cover not being able to. It wasn't detecting something with the detector. So I had to go in and test and tweak a little bit of the settings so that it would detect for like tall cover. It would actually stand you up when you go to tall cover and not crouch you down. So fix that. There's also something where I wanted to be able to transition from. I had to override the behavior because it would only let you transition around corners. Depending on where the camera was looking, I wanted to be able to transition around corners. But then I figured out something where it's like, I don't want to be able to transition around all corners because I want to stop at this corner because of I want to be able to hit the aim trigger and pop out for aiming, and I want to be able to stop there. If I kept going left, it would just go around the corner. So I do want to not enable that for the corners specifically facing the camera like this. So kept that around, but all the other corners now work regardless of the camera angle. So fix that. Next thing I got done was aiming over the cover. So previously when you'd aim, it would just maintain the left or whatever it was looking at. So now when you aim, you can actually it goes to forward position by default, and then you can rotate with move, but also more fine-tuned, you can actually strafe aim, and it still sticks to the cover. And if you release the aim, it goes back to cover, and the actual rotation of the aim input is disabled. So it works great. What else is there? Aim over cover. So there's also some before, I didn't notice this, but in the Invector demo, there's actually these custom animations when you go into cover. So if you're just crouching before, it would play the standard crouch walk animation, but now I fixed it so that it actually plays the cover crouch walk animations. Here it would just look like he's standing against the wall in the running pose, but now he kind of puts his back to the wall and does a different kind of walk when he's in cover, which is cool. Looks a lot better. So Wednesday and Thursday, I started going back and adjusting the IK, because there's a bunch of new states now for aiming around corners, and then where the gun is positioned when you're strafing around here and there on these different. So I had to adjust the actual position of the gun and this and that. So I had to learn how to do the IK adjustment again the right way. I eventually got it sorted out, and that's looking good. He actually he aims in the right spot when he pops around the corner. That's great. All looking good. So about in the middle of Thursday, I I hope and pray, but you know, this eventually happens. I wanted to implement new functionality, but this time I wasn't so fortunate. So when he looks out undercover, I wanted to be able to, originally, the aiming, you know, you could just pop out of cover and shoot, but what if the enemy's over here, you know? I want to be able to shoot over there. Well, the aiming right now is like, it's fine to strafe aiming because it's always going to be pointing in regardless, you know. It's not, this is, so when you're in a cover, it's a special type of aiming. Your rotation is fixed, but you want to still aim with your torso. That's kind of a new deal. So how do you do that? So my first attempts on doing this, because I did something similar with the robot turret, where his turret is actually controlled by a rig builder component, and it's actually pointing at a target, so this can rotate independently and override the actual the animation. So I tried to apply that to the character as well, but it just wasn't working right. It was all messed up. The actual rotation was not like a level on the x-axis. It was going up to the y. It was like an arc. It was looking all funny. It didn't look right at all. So something in the vector system wasn't allowing it. Somewhere deep in the system, something was conflicting. What was it? Was it the animation controller? Was that causing it to not work? So I spent many hours diving into the Invector's cover and aiming systems, trying to discover anything I could, any kind of evidence of what was going on here. So I decided to scrap the rig builder approach and maybe try to use something that Invector has that I could, you know, bootstrap, because they had something like look at target, like you'd have a target and it would kind of rotate your torso to look at it. That kind of worked, but it didn't work. It worked in the normal state, but it didn't work if you went to aiming. Aiming would take over in the position, so it wouldn't. When you went to the aiming state, it still aims in one direction. It stopped looking at the target. So that kind of didn't work, and I couldn't figure out why. So I was testing the Invector demo, trying to decipher, you know, how it behaves and get a clue maybe how I could, you know, do what they're doing. But the problem was their demo, my feature I want to implement was kind of outside the reach of their demo. Like, their demo is in a third person, so when they're in a corner aiming, the actual third person aiming it depends on the camera aim angle in order to do that. And mine is a top-down system, so that wasn't gonna work. And also they have a top-down demo, but it doesn't implement any cover mechanics. So it's kind of like a gray area where I kind of have to come up with something and, you know, figure out what the problem is with no kind of demo going on, you know. So you know, Invector is the system. They give you documentation, but like at the end of the day, you really have to dive into their systems in order to understand what's happening. It's not spelled out for you. It's like putting together a puzzle. All these different systems, and then the cover and the aiming system are just another wing of the maze. So I was, you know, I ended the day on Wednesday. Okay, just keep working on it. So on Thursday, I sat back down and because I was getting confused with the animator, like all these different layers. You know, how do they? I went through it once, but it's like, how is it actually? You know, is the animation controller the culprit for not allowing me to override the aim? Is it's going to the state? How does all these layers work and all these all these different modes and stuff. So I sat and watched the video and really kind of understood that, you know, the layer below, depending on the mode, if it's override, if the weight is on, it'll override everything above it. So, you know, I understood that, but it still wasn't really getting me to why it wasn't allowing me to kind of look where I wanted to. It was always looking in this one direction wherever I'm rotated when I'm aiming. So, um, testing, just coming up empty-handed. Maybe it was Invector's IK usage, but you know, how is that so? Because it only affects the actual, arms and stuff, and all these layers are masked off for the arms, so that didn't seem likely. Just doing a ton of testing and just keep looking at the vector system code. By the end of the day, I was feeling pretty much completely defeated. It was one of those technical coding days of defeat. And an entire day grinding with no progress, just stumbling around in a huge maze. Was I even getting any closer? But this is the thing, you know, next day there's nothing to do but continue. So I was getting kind of radical at this point. I was wanting to, you know, just tear apart the animation controller, start from the ground up. You know, that'll give me some clue as to maybe the animation controller is the culprit. Turned out to be a bad idea because it broke everything very badly, so I quickly went back to the current one. I set up the rig builder again and tried to give it another shot, you know, and, you know, still the same results. You know, whenever you aim, you know, the rig builder would kind of do it a little bit, but you could tell that it was fighting. Like, I could move the torso. That was not affected by the IK, but the actual arms are still in the same position, pointing forward. So he's kind of half doing it. Just kept grinding, kept testing, kept looking at vector systems. You know, just kind of getting frustrated. Why will the gun not budge from the aim direction? You know. But then all of a sudden, I see, you know, words like update aim behavior function. Maybe this is the path. I start to follow it, and I see things like aim position, desired aim point. You know, closer and closer. You know, testing. It's just like until I realized that, like, yes, this is it. I finally found what, you know, the point. I found the exit to the maze. You know, the solution to the riddle. In Vector, what's happening in Vector, it's setting the aim position. So when you're aiming, by default, the behavior is to say on every update to aim in the direction that the characters, you know, transform forward, you know. So this is going to, so it's not the actual animation controller is not the problem. The vector is specifically saying, you know, aim in this direction. And this happens on the update loop. So my rig builder is not able to override that behavior. It's never going to budge from that, you know. So as soon as I overwrote that behavior, now I can actually control where his actual torso is looking. So a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of testing, and it all kind of fell into place, you know. And that feels like $1 million when you finally, you know, hit a huge, you know, real difficult that takes, you know, a ton of time to figure out, but then all of a sudden you're able to make it happen, and that's, you know, that's the job, you know. So I felt good about that. It was a real relief, you know, actually being unblocked, being able to move past that. And now from a corner I can actually shoot in a direction, and it's kind of limited by range, so you can't go all the way back. You can only, and you can't go into the wall. It's set by a range, clamped. Same thing with over here. You can only go to a certain angle. And oh, that's interesting. I just noticed that when he's at the extreme angle, he actually shoots down a bit. I gotta adjust that. It should be level. But anyways, so that was nearing the end of the week. The last remaining hours of the time, I started looking at the next feature to actually be able to jump over cover. So, like a cover, like something like this, I should be able to just hop over it. So I spent time looking at the Invector demo and seeing how they do it, and also other things like being able to transition from one cover to the other. So they have a way, sort of, I kind of have to adapt a custom solution, but basically if you're in the corner and there's a cover nearby, you press a button and it will jump to the next one, like so. Yeah, so more implementation for another day. More features next week. The epic for implementing all these new set of player features is, I got a few things done, but more things like jumping over cover, moving from cover to cover, like I just described, but also when you go behind cover, I want to do kind of an X-ray thing so you can see where the character is. You don't get blind since the camera's in a fixed angle. And moving on to other smaller issues to fix, but working on player aim assist. So when you're aiming at a target, it'll kind of, at some point, it'll kind of stick to the target and kind of resist. So it'll kind of favor staying on the target until you're kind of too far away from the target. So it'll kind of help lock on, a soft lock on to the target, so to speak. Just so it's not so, not so hard to hit him at the perfect, excuse me, at the perfect angle. And then another weapon, probably an assault rifle weapon, which shouldn't be too bad, and then maybe a dual wield pistol, which might be a little bit of more of a challenge, but along the same vein. Maybe some shooting weapon FX and a shield break VFX, something like that. But yeah, more work for sure. Probably that'll take another week just working on the rest of these player features, but got things done this week, and we will talk to you next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.